In this episode of Adversity to Strength, I'm joined by Andrew Engbring, a leader in the behavioral health field whose own recovery and decades of experience inspired him to transform how families approach addiction and mental health crises. Andrew has held leadership roles across the behavioral health world, from director of admissions and program director to CEO of a large-scale intervention organization. But it was his personal journey and the encouragement of clients and colleagues that led him and his wife to found the Reflection Family Interventions, a program dedicated to guiding families from crisis to genuine healing and connection. Andrew believes recovery doesn't start at rock bottom. It starts when families are given the tools and the support to create change together. In our conversation, he shares powerful insights about breaking the rock bottom myth, understanding family dynamics in addiction, and helping loved ones move from survival to transformation. This episode is about hope, accountability, redefining what recovery really means, not just for the individual, but for the entire family. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take us back to the beginning. Where did your journey start with all of this?
My journey started, gosh, probably all the way back to, if we go way back, right? Growing up, mom, dad, three brothers, no family trauma, no, it was a wonderful family, right? Lots of love, hardworking people. We weren't victims of prosperity or poverty, right? Just your average middle class working family. Everything was great. Sometime around 13, 14 years old, I decided I wanted to smoke cannabis, smoke some marijuana, and good Lord, did I like it. Well, we'll back that up a little bit. The first time I tried it, I had no idea what I was doing, right? And so me and this girl, we tried rolling a joint with notebook paper, and we just coughed all over the place and didn't feel it, didn't anything. So from there, we decided we had to do some research, right? Somebody told us how to make an apple pipe, and man, did I like it, right? It was an instant switch for me. For the first time I got loaded, I was hooked. And it wasn't necessarily the weed that I was hooked on. It was just the relief, the sensation, the feeling. I
Yeah.
did not want to feel sober ever again. So pursued that for probably the next 10, 12 years. Didn't have a single day without getting intoxicated on something for the next decade and a half, almost decade and a half, right? Which ultimately resulted in, me being, without a place to live and needle in my arm, and was not doing very well by any account, right? I found my way through a couple of rehab programs and psychiatric units, tried to
Right.
check into a detox at one point, and that was a pretty defeating moment. The detox facility wouldn't take me, which was
Yeah. How
astounding
come?
to me. They said I was too nuts. He said, we just want no part of this guy and his behavior and what he's doing, right? They said, get this guy out of here. They sent me to a psychiatric unit, right? And I don't have any mental health disorders or anything to that nature, right? Definitely severe substance use disorder. But um, I think I tested dirty at that unit for 11 out of the 12 panels on the drug test. I was positive for everything but PCP, and might have been on a couple of things they couldn't test for. But I'll never forget just how hopeless things felt at that moment. That's a pretty defeating space when looking for help, and even the detox unit says you are just too far gone for us. Through that journey, at least, spirituality is a big part of my story of my recovery. And I think it is for many, and I'm not here to say that anybody has to have that, doesn't have that. I'm not here to preach, but I'll certainly speak from my experience is that, I found God in early recovery, or rather, I'd say God found me in early
Mhm.
recovery, after a couple of very colorful curse word ridden prayers, he showed up. Right. And that absolutely carried and inspired me through took a couple of treatment programs before I started figuring things out.
Yeah.
And from there, this whole working in the behavioral health space also found me. I ultimately wound up into a sober living home. And this was a sober living home in coastal California, Southern California on the coast there. And I had no idea what I was going to do. Like, I had no direction in life, certainly a lot of ambition, but not a lot of willingness to do any work, right?
Yeah.
I was working
How
at
old were you? How old
23,
were you at the time? 23.
23 years old at the time. Yeah. I was working at a doggy daycare. It was people take their dogs there, or we would go and pick them up and play with their dogs all day while they were at work, and then take them back home. And that's what I was doing,
Yeah.
living in a sober living home, and ran out of money when I made it into Get into that sober living, my family had they promised me 3 months, right? We're gonna help you out for 3 months in sober living. And beyond that, your life is your responsibility. You have our love, you have our support, you have nothing physical from us, right? Now there will be no money, there will be no vehicles, no pizzas, no food, no hotels, no absolutely nothing. Right. But we will love and support you. And so when that 3 months was up, I didn't have any money and I didn't have anywhere to go. And it just so happened that about a week before, the house manager of the sober living quit. Just don't want to do this anymore, and he packed up his things and said that today's his last day. And so the guy who owned the place looked over and said, "Well, Drew, you can stay here for free and manage the sober living house." Give me a sense of purpose, sense of direction, and it was certainly convenient for the living circumstance, right?
Yes. Two birds, one stone.
Exactly. Just looked at the guy and it was, that sounds a lot better than what I did have planned out, which is a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah.
So I did that. And after some time, they made a deal. They said, look, we're not going to pay you, but we will pay for your school. We'll pay your tuition and books and all of that. And you can stay here and manage the sober living house and go back to school, which was beautiful. It was perfect, and of course, discovered a whole passion for helping people. So I did that for a few years, got married. Everything was wonderful. And it was time to move on from that sober living, right? You can't really live in an aftercare house with a bunch of other addicts, right? When you're
Yeah.
when you're married and wanting to start a family, right? But that grew into quite a few positions throughout the behavioral health space, from detoxes to rehabs to nonprofit work and this whole theme of intervention kept coming up. And so I got curious enough about the intervention world, worked through a couple of intervention outfits, and ultimately retired as CEO of a incredibly large scale intervention company, the largest one in the United States. My wife and I did that because we watched a trend happen over and over again, in that when somebody's has a mental disorder, process addiction, substance use disorder, whatever the problem seems to be, right? There's so many resources for them. There's support groups and therapists and inpatient programs and outpatient programs. And I mean, regardless of what path they go down, they're just surrounded with more guidance than they could ever want, more help, more resources than they could ever want. And time again, we watch the family members be given little more than a pamphlet. Their loved ones
Yeah.
checking into this program, and the family's given a pamphlet, a couple of update calls from the therapist, and they tell them, go to Al-Anon, go to Al-Anon, go to Al-Anon, right? And there's just, we found very little effective resources for the very family members. And then what a lot of us learn in school is that the environment is one of the largest predictors of outcomes.
Without a doubt.
The environment somebody returns to or they're in during their treatment and after their treatment is almost just as important as the treatment center itself, right? The actual treatment they're getting. And so that's what we wanted to create when we started Reflection is, well, why is nobody doing anything about the environment? And through this intervention vessel, it's such a beautiful way of doing it, in that we start in the crisis. People are calling us because their person, right? Their mom, their dad, their brother, sister, child, whatever it might be, is in desperate need of help. They're in crisis. They're not doing anything about their problem. Half the time, they won't even admit there's a problem exists, right? And you're able to win a lot of confidence and trust over from the very family members through that intervention process and getting them into their programs. Why can't we stay involved? And that's what we really did with this whole Reflection thing, was we created a 6-month family continuum of care, in that we can start with crisis, guide them through whatever treatment process, recovery process their loved one needs, but the family's also doing their own program,
Yeah.
which ultimately integrates their loved one back into the family system post care. So it wraps around at least what the available professional services entirely. And we're seeing just incredible outcomes. Just over the last 12 months, 90% of our cases have graduated the family program still sober, or whatever their illness was is by all accounts in remission. We're just seeing astounding outcomes coming from it just by paying attention to the environment, paying attention to that family system. It's an absolutely beautiful thing. But more or less, that's my story. There was no heartbreak, trauma, mental disorders, anything. I just really liked drugs, and they killed me. I mean, actually killed me more than
Because
once.
it's interesting, really, because as a therapist, whenever, obviously all the time, I get clients come to me, they've got a drink problem, they've got a drug problem. My brain automatically goes, where's your trauma? without a doubt. Where's all your trauma? And it is very rare where somebody just stumbles into it. But obviously, if you've got an addictive personality or something like that, then it can be easy done there. And I guess that
Well,
kind of what happened with yourself.
yeah, and I think sometimes it also depends on the state of mind you're in when you're in therapy.
Yeah.
You know, because had you talked to me in that moment in early recovery, this was, gosh, 13 years ago now. Had you had talked to me in that moment, oh man, I would have given you a laundry list of all the horrible things that had happened to me and all the traumas I had been through. And, you know, I would have given you this massive list on why it was everybody else's fault and not mine. I really liked that victim mentality, right?
Yeah.
But I also had an incredibly distorted perception. And a lot of the professionals I had worked with were either didn't have the knowledge, the expertise, and even the ones that did just flat didn't have the time to really dig into what I was telling them to verify things. You know, I would have told you all kinds of things as far as trauma is concerned. Today, I look back, I wouldn't account for any of that being traumatic. So I think a lot of it does kind of come, you know, is a perspective thing too, right? What state of mind are you in as you're processing out your life?
Yeah. And I would imagine your state of mind would have just deteriorated over that period of time. As you like progress there as well, which tends to be a way. But it's really interesting with what you said about the environment. I say it on a daily basis to clients that we're a product of our environment. It doesn't mean we have to stay in that environment. We might be born in an environment that's not good, and yes, we can get out of it. And it doesn't define us. I've had I spoke to people that are like they're like the drugs awareness people that get people off of drugs, um, and I've had a chat with them and I said to him about getting people off drugs, and they said that's easy. It's just easy to get people off drugs. He said the problem is if they don't change their environment, they go straight back on drugs. That's it. Um, so, which I get that. So, and I've had clients where they've got a big drug problem, drink problem, and they're putting all this time and effort into therapy. And I'm like, yeah, you understand everything, but why are you not making the progress? And I'm like, right, the people that you hang around with, you still hang around with them? Yeah. I was like, until you change your environment, what you've always got, you'll always give. And then you give the reasons there as well. Uh, with what you're saying about the support for families, like in the UK, I don't even know what there is out there now, but the rule of thumb is that it's for the person that's going through it, but for the actual partner, their partner might have like a mental illness, an addiction there, but for the actual love and partner that's there for them, there's nothing. There is nothing at all. So they're like, well, how do I manage this? How do I deal with it? It's our son's not there. What do we do? It just seems to be no real support. And I wonder, is it why nobody's done it like you have decades ago? Is it to save money? Do you know what I mean?
Well, a lot of it's not really billable effectively to insurance companies. I'm pretty convinced that has a lot to do with it. It's just not billable. The other piece too is it's hard to get families to participate.
Is it acceptance?
It's hard to get them to take accountability for how have they been affected. So many people really like that narrative of that's their problem, they deal with it, I'm not affected. And it's good Lord, yes, you are.
I deal with it on a daily basis, whether it's like a client or their partner or parents, often parents, where they will not take accountability that they might be the problem, or they will play down what that person's going through to, oh, he'll be all right. It's just his way. And it's like, you're not taking any accountability. Can you not see this? And they just bury their head. How do you deal with things like that? Because that must be very difficult.
I think a lot of times it comes, at least in my experience, it's come on how you're framing it. This whole recovery space has done a wonderful job of utilizing terms like enabling and codependency as if it's some form of shameful act, as if it somehow implies blame. And even if that's not our intention, a lot of times that's the people we're working with, they're going to perceive it that way.
Yeah, of
You
course.
know, the dreaded enabling word, right? The E word. You can almost feel people's hackles going up when you say it. And so we've really gone through some painstaking effort to look at how are we communicating these ideas so that they're palatable. Bottom line, I think what it comes down to is realistically it's safety seeking behavior. Right? It's trauma response. You know,
Yeah,
what is your part in this? Well, you're responding to trauma. You know, the family members, especially parents and spouses and partners, they are living in
yeah,
active trauma day in and day out, right? we go into that trauma mode, we revert into some lower pieces of the brain that aren't exactly cognitive. We go into survival mode, and we'll do a lot of things to help us feel safe in that moment.
Yeah.
And the
Quite right.
disconnect becomes what feels safe is not what's necessarily actually safe in the long run. And so some of it comes down to communication, or a lot of it does, really, in being able to explore this without blame, without shame. Bottom line, I think everybody just wants to be seen, heard, and understood. And so that we found that to be really, really helpful in, not just saying, to tell a parent to stop enabling their child or even adult child. It's like telling an alcoholic, why don't you just stop drinking?
Yeah.
It just doesn't compute, right? We have to look at what needs are you validating through that drink? What needs are you validating through those enabling dynamics, right? How are you using this to get your needs met, and what are some more effective ways of meeting those needs? And so we're able to frame it into, it can be framed in a different way that I think is a lot more palatable and effective for a great many people. I think one of the better metaphors I've come up with is if you loved somebody with diabetes, you just desperately, wholeheartedly love somebody and they're diabetic. Probably the most appropriate response you could take. Educate yourself about their illness. Learn
Yeah.
everything you could. Go straight to the most reputable sources you can find and get all the information you can. What kind of foods do I need to have? What do I need to prepare? What are glucose levels? When do I give them a hard candy? When do I call 911? I'm sure there's an equivalent for 911 in the UK. What is it?
999.
99. There you go.
They
You
never turn
know,
up though.
but you would want to learn everything you could about how to manage their
Yeah.
illness. And if you found your diabetic loved one with an entire chocolate cake in their lap and they're wolfing it down, you would have absolutely no guilt, fear, or remorse taking that away from them, throwing it in the garbage, no matter how much they begged or pleaded you not to.
Yeah.
You would have no remorse or fear over holding them accountable and having very firm boundaries and accountability of this is not going to happen. But for some reason, with mental illness, with addiction, we want to play into the comfort of our loved one more so than their actual recovery.
Think as a therapist, I think a lot of people just still don't understand that they don't know. And it's the easy options there, which is where you get your enabling from there. And you see it all the time because people just don't know. They just don't know. I've got a question for you. You must get this quite a lot where, say, for example, you've got like the adult child that's got an alcohol problem. The family want to get involved, and suddenly you realize the dad or the mum or both of them, they've got an alcohol problem as well. What do you do when you come up against that? Just as you're ready to go, right, you need to, okay, right, we'll come back to you in a minute. What happens there?
We're all going to treatment. Help.
Noticed. Surely you must get some denial. No, I'm
Sometimes they
fine.
don't know. So I'll use a case example because I think that's probably one of the better ways of looking at this, right?
Sure.
So, and this case just happened about 6 months ago, right? A mother was calling in for her 33, 34-year-old son. He had a lot of, I mean, he had some injuries which turned into opioid use, and he was really just off the rails. So much so, the young man's wife had actually left the home because she just couldn't take it anymore. He's not doing anything with the problem. It's hurting her. She actually left. She didn't divorce him or anything, but she had to move out. She just couldn't expose herself to it. So his mother was calling in about this. Look, I'd like to step in and see if we can do something about getting him help before he completely burns his life to the ground. And he's still holding a very successful job at that moment too. And yes, his father, lifelong alcoholic, right? Lifelong alcoholic, still, still drunk, at the intervention pretty much. So the intervention with us, it happens over the course of a couple of days, right? There's kind of a series of meetings prior to the intervention with the family members, really learning everything we need to know. Then there's this whole in-person 8-hour planning session, right? And so we go through a lot with the family before ever sitting down with the patient. I'll really make sure we got the I's dotted, the T's crossed, and we understand what we're walking into and everybody's prepared. And so, yes, it came out. Dad hasn't had a day sober in decades, right? Probably 4 or 5 decades, since he's, had strung together more than a couple of days without alcohol. In that case, we just called it out right then and there in the preparation day, right? The day
What'd you
before the
say?
intervention. Looked at him and said, I won't disclose his name here, but sir, here's the reality of this. You're going to go sit down with your son tomorrow and ask him to go into a treatment program because you're scared he's going to lose his life if he doesn't. and he's already more or less lost his marriage and he's about to lose his job. What is he going to tell us about your drinking? And we got lucky on this one in that the dad goes, well, I'm an alcoholic. He fully admits it. And so we said, look, here's the bottom line. We're not going to have you be a part of this intervention to any degree if you're not going to do something about that. There's no way we can allow you to be a hypocrite sitting in front of your son. We're not going to be a part of that. You either need to exit stage left now, or we need to talk about what you're going to do about your drinking. And before you even make any of these decisions, here's the piece I really want you to focus on. You're worried about your son. You're worried about his resistance. We've been through that for hours and hours over the last couple of days. I've witnessed a lot of tears, a lot of emotion coming from you. You're scared for this guy. How powerful do you think it will be when we sit down with your son tomorrow and you can take ownership of your problem and set the example and say, by the way, I'm also going to get some help too. Will you join me on a path of recovery? In his case, right? He says, absolutely. Anyway, we arranged a program for him and it turned out exactly that way, right? He ended up in a program. His son went into a program. They just graduated our family program 2 weeks ago. Both father, son are still sober. The marriage isn't perfect. The son's marriage isn't perfect, but they're back together. They're living together. They're working. They'll probably be in some marriage counseling for quite some time, but they're really working on things, right? And there's just an incredible amount of hope. So
Yeah, no, it definitely want to come back to what you're saying there because it's so interesting. I really love the way you come across. You come across really firm, but really nice. And I think if I was the guy that's got problems and you're telling me that in that way, I'll probably feel like a 10-year-old and I'll be like, yes, sir, I'm sorry. Actually, you know what? I will be there tomorrow because I would feel that the way that you've come across in that way, I actually want to do something about this. And you've noticed that. Do you know what I mean? Do you find that you can tell or you can't tell where you say that and you get some people to go, yeah, do you know what? Fair enough. I'm glad somebody's finally pointed it out. I'm going to do something about it. Or you get, and I've had this as a therapist where somebody drinks a whole bottle of whiskey at 8 a.m. in the morning and justifies it because it's a night shift and it's still their night. And you're like, I can't deal with this. Do you get people to go, yeah, that's fine. I'll do that. Or people go, no, no, I don't have a drink problem. Okay, no worries.
Well, and
So,
when they don't, that's when we need to start looking at what is preventing them from, clinically speaking, we call it stages of change, right?
yeah.
What has them arrested in that pre-contemplation stage, which again is a product of environment, right? This is why I'm so adamant against this whole rock bottom idea. In
Yeah,
that when we
tell
find
me.
those resistance, right? I don't
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
problem. Yeah, I'm drinking whiskey at 8 a.m., but it's not an issue, right? I drank the night shift. Or I work the night shift. It's okay. Whatever excuse they have. Well, now we need to look at what's making that drink sustainable for them. Who else lives in the home that's being affected? I don't believe there's a such thing as a functioning alcoholic, right? They may function as in pay bills and this and that, right? But they function for everybody but their very family members and the people that love them the most, right? They're the ones that are getting hurt. Had that
Yeah.
father sat there and said, it's just, I've got it under control. I'm not going to do anything about this. So don't worry about my drinking. That conversation would have immediately needed to turn to his wife and his other two children of, how do you feel about what's going on under your own roof? Let's talk to these children. How do you feel raised? I mean, tell me, what was it like to be raised by a man who drinks every day?
How does that one go? Ask them whether it's like adults or maybe kids that are a bit younger, because even though you already know the answers a lot of the time, do you get different answers? The kids where they're really honest, or the adult where they're really honest about it, or the ones that go, no, it's all fine, it's all gone, it's all okay. You know, I'm up against
Well,
that.
in a setting like this, because I mean, we get kind of an isolated bubble in the intervention world, right? But in a setting like this, usually we find that most of these family members, I mean, it's almost textbook. The
Yeah,
people involved, they want somebody to give them a voice. They've been afraid to say this out loud forever, right? And when you finally
now's
give
their
them that
chance.
platform and that microphone, that it's validating, right? Finally, somebody sees me
Right.
as this man's wife, right? Finally somebody sees me and what I've been living through, which is usually much more painful than the addiction itself.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
definitely. Yeah.
you know, and same thing with the children. In this case, the children were all adults, right? But even in that case, perfect opportunity for the daughter to, I've never known which father I was going to get.
Yeah.
Why do you think I have to be so independent? Why do you think I have so much space for my family, right? I can't rely on my family. Mom's always wrapped up in your nonsense. You're off in your own little world, passed out drunk. How could I rely on you guys? And so a lot of times we'll try to use that very family system to start pulling out those pain points. And what's creating the denial? What's
Yeah,
creating that?
it's
Yeah,
a good, yeah, that's a good question, because as a therapist, I mean, I get denial all the time, and it's denial is that it's a problem. It's denial that it's masking a trauma or something like that. What is it you tend to get when you get like a denial? I do it because I like it, or saying that I don't get. I've not really had hardly anyone that's had an addiction that say they like taking drugs, that they like drinking too much alcohol. Very rare, minimal. Usually somebody in denial. That's it. I don't know about yourself.
in our space, I mean, because interventions are not exactly meant to be therapy, we get to be a
Mm.
little more aggressive on it and just flat tell them, like,
Tell
you're
me
full of
about
shit.
that.
Yeah, man, you're full of shit. Like, you are full of shit. Don't even bother with the excuses. Reality in
Yeah.
the intervention world, I don't care why you do it and why you like to do it. Then none of that matters. Would you benefit from getting help for this?
Mm.
That's the question I'm here to answer. In the intervention, this isn't a clinical setting. This is not the space to draw out all of the issues and figure out the underlying, right? That's your job on the therapy side. We'll drop them
This is
off at your office and let you get down to that. But I mean, we just flat tell them you're full of shit. And bottom line, these people are hurting and they can't live this way anymore.
yeah.
Regardless of your choices, your family is choosing to go into recovery today. And part of their recovery, they need to distance themselves from your behaviors. The minute
Right.
you're ready to distance from your behaviors as well, your family's here. But you've got to be willing to distance from the behaviors that are harming the people you love.
Yeah. When you
Yeah,
say it in that way, I can imagine so many people have an epiphany moment. And for those years, they didn't realize the damage they were doing. And you've just pointed out to them in 2 minutes, and they're like, oh, you know what? I think I really need to make changes.
exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, we look 97% of our cases have accepted treatment. Yeah,
And
and
the
these are some of the
3%,
most resistant little critters you'll ever get.
and the 3%
Um,
are the ones that that they just can't bear the thought. They're in denial.
I mean, so
How-
there's one that comes to top of mind. We don't
Yeah.
have any medical diagnosis because she won't go to the doctor, but I'm pretty convinced. I mean, she's elderly, alcoholic dementia. I'm pretty sure we're on wet brain, right? She's just not really
Yeah. Yeah.
cognitively there anymore. A few of them are methamphetamine cases. Those are bad. Those are
Yeah.
real,
Yeah.
real difficult cases because the psychotic features are just too advanced. And then a handful of others are, very advanced bipolar type disorders, no substance use at all, and it's really hard to find some clarity with them. Bottom line, I think what those 3% really come down to is there's just no emotion
You ain't got
processing,
anything
right?
to
They're
work
just
with.
not feeling emotion anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's only so much you can do. Same as the therapy. There's only so much you can do. I've had clients. I'm like, "Do you know what? I'm all out. I've run out of things to say. I can't help you. You just can't. Whether it's you're the wrong therapist, or we usually know at the beginning, or whether someone's too severe. There's lots of reasons there as well. But for 97%, that's an amazing. That's unbelievable. That's
A
amazing.
lot of
And
people accepting treatment.
yeah, that's great. That is great. That is great. And I would imagine, again, I'm thinking as a therapist, when clients start getting results and they're starting to feel the difference, they build a bit of momentum up. They can't wait for that. So was it one session a week every week for sort of 6 months in the program?
So typically, like the patient themselves is often, their programming, whether it's a residential, a hospital, an outpatient, different types, right? But they're off doing all their therapy and their programming, working on their issues, right? The family on our side, there's a healthy mix, right? So we have some multi-family support groups, that are more psychoeducational. Let's go through
Yeah.
education and, learn the things we need to learn, right? And so we'll combine a lot of families together into, kind of one big group and go through some psycho ed. They'll do some individual work throughout the week as well. We'll also assign them homework when they're really, really struggling. We also do like a morning mindfulness call 5 days a week, right? 15-minute cameras off Zoom every morning. Just jump in, start your day with, set your intentions for the day, start your day on the right track, and then whatever crisis falls in between. Typically, by the time the loved one is completing their course of treatment, that can be anywhere from 30 to 90 days in, right? Depending on severity, we'll then invite them into this family programming where we a lot of times have to up the intensity in the beginning Maybe we're
Yeah.
meeting several times a week in the beginning to work through some of the harder things, and then we can back off intensity as we go. So there's not exactly a set structure. We've also done some really cool things because what I found is that a lot of times the skills the families really need to develop, when they're doing that reintegration, how do we develop new relationships in recovery? Well, there's some
Yeah.
really common themes, right? They don't know what to talk about anymore. Their relationship is defined by crisis for so long. They're kind of staring at each other. They don't know what to say anymore. They don't
Yeah.
absent crisis and chaos and control. They find that they really don't have a lot of relationship. And it's been a lot of years since they've had any meaningful relationship. And so we'll try to do a lot of skill building. One of the things I really like doing is we engage a wellness routine. Pretty basic stuff, right? Let's set up your 7 daily habits of diet, exercise, meditation, reflection, right? Journaling or
Yeah.
mindfulness, right? Hydration, regular physical health type things. But set up kind of an accountability exercise around it where they set weekly goals, work that out together as a family. Here's my goals, what are your goals, right? All of that. And then we come back to it the next week. And it becomes this really fun thing of holding each other accountable,
Yeah. Did you do your
finding
homework?
interest, finding new things to talk about, right? Maybe we have them all read the same book, or maybe we have them all, watch TED Talks or podcasts or whatever it might be as a part of that to where we can build communication, shared accountability, shared goal setting, passion, interests, new relationships and quality time while avoiding some of the more triggering topics. So we're not just repeating that same cycle of crisis over and over and over again. They're also starting to spend a lot more time with each other, which builds trust that it becomes this really, really beautiful thing that we engage them through. But that's kind of the general idea of it is they don't know what to talk about anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's that void. There's that void. And I've had it with clients where suddenly we've dealt with the issue for the first time in their lives. They don't have any anxiety anymore. They're not catastrophized. They're like, I'm looking for something to worry about because I've got this void. All right, right. Fill it up with positive stuff, good stuff there. And is that what you try and get them to do is to fill that vacuum with something that's positive and fulfilling as opposed to like,
Yeah.
there's an empty space here.
Yeah, and engage it as a family system,
Yeah.
right? Because again, now we're creating an entirely new environment where we're talking about healthy foods and did you drink enough water and did you play that video game you wanted to play or whatever it might be. They're learning new things together. We're also pretty firm believers in that people need to stop separating their physical and their mental health, and that the two are pretty darn related. And
Yeah.
especially in the United States, the American diet is absolutely horrible,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The Americans eat nothing but processed foods and tons of sugars. I mean, we have sugar in our bread, right? It's
Yeah.
insane. And so, through that whole wellness lens, wouldn't you know it, right? People start to feel a little better once they start treating their bodies a little better too.
Yeah, it's the same old story, and it's all about with what your program is. It's a lot of routine and consistency with everything. Which, again, as a therapist, especially if you've got somebody that's been through trauma and they're used to a chaotic life, it's everything. Having that consistency, that routine makes
Hmm.
such a difference there. What do you do when you get, say, I'm just thinking parents or whatever, or that they're blaming themselves, whether rightly or wrongly. You're trying to get them to work on themselves, but they're blaming. I mean, you must get that all the time. A lot of people look for a self blame. So how do you deal with that? Whether it's true or not, you know?
I mean, a lot of times you validate it. And it kind of depends on the case, but you know what? If you're blaming yourself, there might be something to look at there. Let's explore that. Yeah, and even though you might not be ultimately responsible for their disorder, you are responsible for how you reacted to it, what you've
Yes.
done about this, what your part in this has been. I don't think it's ever wise to tell a parent, oh, it's not your fault. There's nothing you could have done. I don't think that's healthy. There's
No.
always something you could have done differently.
Yeah.
Now, but we also need to talk that might not be a cause and effect relationship either, right? Your actions may not have caused it. Sure, maybe they contributed, but let's work through that.
Hmm.
And so a lot of times yeah, let's validate a piece of that. There's a reason part of you feels this.
Yeah.
Let's work through it. One powerful exercise we'll do sometimes is we'll have, once we kind of get the family at large together, we'll have them go through an accountability process of taking ownership of their anger, their resentments, why they were afraid that triggered that resentment, what their part in their resentments were with each other, that it's incredibly uncomfortable. And this usually takes place over, a series of meetings over weeks, right? But everybody's pulling out their laundry list of resentments, all the issues they have with each other. But there's a really important piece we add in there is the accountability, right? You also need to take ownership of what is your part in every resentment you have. And ultimately, it becomes a really beautiful exercise where they start to see each other differently and each other's perspectives differently. And that helps with a lot of that guilt and self blame right there.
Yeah, definitely. You can see that. You can see that. And for me, accountability is one of the hardest things to get people to do.
Hmm.
It's very it's being in denial there. And I can imagine you get people that argue and there's a tit for tat. And you have to maybe do you step in like as a mediator or anything like that? If you think, hold on, you're starting to blame each other, you're getting off track here. Do you ever have to do anything like that? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's the best part about the intervention world, right? Is we get to turn off our filters. Because again, what we're doing is not meant to be therapy, right? If we hurt your feelings, go talk to your therapist.
Exactly.
But,
Brilliant.
sometimes, yeah, we do have to step in,
Yeah.
or just flat out say, like, "No, you're absolutely wrong here. Look at the way you're reacting to this. Is any part of this helpful?" Right? I mean, and then, of course, remind them into what was your purpose in starting this? A lot of times we'll have the families work out like a mission statement and a vision statement for what they
Right.
want to see for their family in the future. And so when I do have to step in and look, you're full of shit. You're playing a victim. You need to slow that down a little bit and start looking at it from what he's saying. He has a perspective for a reason. Find it. But it's always helpful to refer back to, hey, remember some of that earlier work we did? What is the vision? What is your ultimate mission? And is the way you're reacting right now helpful to that vision that you'd like to see for your family?
That's great. You can get people back on track very easily just by doing that because a lot of people kind of forget and you go, well, remember where you come here. Remember, oh, right. Okay. Yes. And that can get them.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
And if it
That's
doesn't
really
work, sometimes we just need to take a time out. Hey guys, I
so,
think
yeah,
that might
mate.
be enough today, right? I want everybody to think about, process this, and let's resume in a couple days.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. It's really smooth. You already know if you get this out how to obviously, goes with what you do there as well. But I can see how the way you are would diffuse potential arguments very easily with a simple sentence, especially go, you know what? Because you already know, you can see what's going to happen in a couple of minutes' time. So you can like, you know what? We just check back in tomorrow. That'll do for today.
Yeah,
Imagine a lot of times people just stop. Oh, okay, fine. It's like the whistle goes. That's the end.
yeah,
All right, see you tomorrow. That's
exactly.
how long you been doing this for?
I mean, I traced my career back to all the way working in that sober living, so that was
Yeah,
almost 13 years ago.
13 years ago. And with the reflection now, how long's that been going?
With Reflection's been open, we're coming up on about 2 years as an
2 years.
official company. We were kind of operating under the table for a little bit before that, unlicensed and all of that.
Sure.
My wife and I had quit our jobs and we didn't know what we were going to do next. And so we did take on a couple of cases just as personal referrals and people contacting us because they knew somebody that we knew, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
ultimately, that's why we ended up starting a whole company anyway, was that people kept calling us. And so we figured we might as well make it official.
Yeah, if you're getting that many people calling you, there's a reason for it there as well. What plans have you got at the moment? Because 2 years in, but it sounds like it's going great. You can see why you would get the results that you do. I mean, it's insane that you're getting such,
Yeah.
percentage of success rates. What's the future for yourself?
We want to share this model with the world. And so we're putting some major investment into a nonprofit right now called the Family Recovery Foundation. And what that's designed to do is provide free clinical resources and guidance for any family anywhere, all on Zoom, and really share a lot of this with the world, right? It's almost disgusting to me that we're the only ones doing this. I just find it astounding and incredibly disappointing at this whole mental health industry that this is unique, right? It blows my mind because what we're doing should not be unique. It should be a standard of care.
You would think so. When you
Yeah.
listen to what you do, you would
So
think,
we've
you
got
would
this
assume that.
nonprofit vessel, and that's what we're doing. That even if you didn't go through the reflection program, you ended up in a treatment program, God knows where, that nobody's ever even heard of before. You can have these kinds of resources available, and then of course doing it under a nonprofit so that we don't necessarily have to charge for it either, right? And eliminate a lot of the financial barriers, because I think that's another big reason families don't get help.
Yeah, of
Insurance doesn't
course.
cover it, and they don't have the money.
Yeah, without a
Um,
doubt. Same in therapy.
yeah, and so that's really, what we're working on now, and ultimately what I hope is that under that nonprofit umbrella, we can start running clinical trials and actually put the data to what happens when the whole family system is treated as a patient in their own right. What happens to the actual patient's recovery when their family is treated as if they were the client themselves? I think anybody with half a brain knows what those outcomes will breed, and
It's a
what those
completely different
studies will say,
environment.
but nobody's actually put the numbers together. And that's I very much would like to do that under the nonprofit. So if anybody listening to this has a generous pocket or knows some big companies looking to donate their nonprofit donations before the end of the year, the Family Recovery Foundation is what we need, because I think that clinical study is probably going to end up costing several $1,000,000 to pull off. That's
Yeah, yeah.
not money we
It's
have.
nah, nah. But the difference it can make if somebody was to do that, and everyone out there is going to know somebody that's been through what the people you deal with go through. You don't even need to know many people. It's just so common there as well. I've loved every second talking to yourself there. I love what you do. It's brilliant. It does astound me as well. You would assume that, but I know as a therapist that there's not that help for families. I know that, but you would assume that there would be. You just would assume, but there's not. And maybe there is, maybe there isn't in the UK. I don't know, but I've not heard of anything like what you do. I've heard people go, there should be more for the families. Should be more. I've heard that a million times. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. And then people just carry on. So
Exactly.
yeah, I think it's brilliant. All of your links will be in the description there as well. I love what you do. Like I said, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been brilliant and really, really insightful. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lee. It's good to have you. Or good. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Pleasure.